In 2011, a huge earthquake followed by a tsunami devastated Japan. Shortly after, hundreds of ghost sightings were reported. Were these people really seeing ghosts, or was this just some kind of manifestation of grief and PTSD? Let's investigate. If you enjoy mysteries, true crime, disappearances, and the occasional conspiracy, please feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. So this will be the last case I'll cover from Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. While they were all equally fascinating and tragic in their own way, I tried to focus on the ones that weren't as well covered. I picked this one specifically because ghosts are something that I haven't really spoken about on this channel, so I thought I'd mix it up a little bit. I'll start by saying that I don't actively believe in ghosts. I mean, I'm definitely open-minded, so I wouldn't completely rule it out, and it's definitely a topic that I've gone back and forth on in my life. But I do believe that most sightings have a logical explanation. But with that said, I will try and be as objective as possible when discussing this case. On 11th of March 2011, a massive earthquake followed by a tsunami hit the coastal Tohoku region and the seaside town of Ishinomaki, killing well over 15,000 people. Many of those who survived had lost family members, co-workers, friends, as well as their homes and pets. Nearly half the city of Ishinomaki was inundated by the tsunami. It caused over $360 billion in damage. A couple of anecdotes were told in the show which were so tragic and very hard to watch. One of a man who found his eldest daughter's body, then his wife's body, and then his baby. I can't even imagine how awful that'd be. The episode really made me realise how I take for granted living in an area where I don't have to worry about earthquakes, tsunamis, and most other natural disasters. Due to a lack of electricity, they couldn't even have funerals or cremate the bodies, which is traditionally the done thing in Japan. The episode didn't mention that the tragedy didn't end at the tsunami. It actually caused a nuclear meltdown at the nearby Fukushima Daiichi reactors, the most severe meltdown since Chernobyl, but that's a story for another day and isn't really relevant to the events summarised in this video. Shortly after the tsunami, residents began reporting frequent ghost sightings. Some claimed that the ghosts were just like normal people, some claimed that they were slightly transparent, others saw shadows on the other side of a window or door. Unsolved Mysteries told the story of a man who was looking for his mother after the tsunami. He was looking in various different shelters, and after looking in a few, he arrived at one where he finally found his mother. He approached her and went to take a photo to show his family that she was okay, but when he took the photo, he realised that the woman wasn't his mother after all. As if at the snap of a finger, the woman's face was not the face that he had been looking at seconds earlier. It actually turned out that his mother had died in the tsunami. Another woman lost her 3-year-old son to the tsunami. She was depressed and struggling to cope. One night she asked her son's spirit to join them for dinner, and to her surprise, one of his toys turned itself on. The toy was manually operated, so aside from a weird malfunction, there's no way that it could have turned itself on. The woman believed that this was a sign from her son, and it gave her purpose again. Another woman recalled a time where she answered the door to a woman who was absolutely drenched and asked for dry clothes, which was very strange considering it wasn't and hadn't been raining. The woman believes that she saw a ghost that day. The episode then features a woman named Kansho who claims to have been able to see ghosts since she was a child. She believes that the spirits were lost because they couldn't return home after their passing. Many of the homes had been destroyed, so they asked people on the streets for help. She thinks that many ghosts do not seem to know that they are dead. One night she was stopped by a group of young men who she thinks were ghosts. One of the men said that he was lost and wanted to go home. Kansho felt that she had to tell the truth, so she told them that they were dead. Reverend Taiyo Kanita recalled a similar event, when he had to tell the spirit of a man that he had died in the tsunami. On another occasion, he said his wife answered the door to a young woman who appeared to be ill, asking for help. She was named Amy in the episode and said that she felt many people inside her and she couldn't stop them. She felt that spirits were entering her body. It was so painful for her that she just wanted someone to kill her. Taiyo states that Amy was not the first person to visit him with similar experiences, but he had never met someone who suffered as much as she did. Amy claimed that she felt the spirit of a little girl crying inside her, and the spirit of a man was holding her leg and wouldn't let go. When Taiyo grabbed her feet, the spirit asked, "Who are you?" to which he responded that he was the Reverend of the temple. The spirit asked why the Reverend was there. Amy claimed she could see him screaming and yelling. Taiyo believes that Amy was possessed, and he thought it was interesting that she had not experienced or been affected by the tsunami in any way. She had not known anyone who had died. Amy visited the temple often after this, and Taiyo claims that he was able to hear spirits through her, one being that of a young girl who had to let go of her brother's hand and watched him wash away in the tsunami. Amy considered the possibility that she was mentally ill, though Taiyo does not believe this to be the case. He simply just believes that she is more sensitive to spirits than most other people. There were many other reports of ghost sightings and supernatural experiences that were not mentioned in the documentary. The book Ghosts of Tsunami, Death and Life in Japan's Disaster by Richard Lloyd Parry features the experiences of a man who lived miles away from the tsunami but visited the area sometime after. When he returned home that evening, he had dinner with his family, drank a can of beer, then began rolling around on the floor making animal noises. He ran outside and rolled around in the mud. He woke up the next day with no recollection of the previous night's events, though this continued for 3 days, as well as him talking in a strange voice about the dead and threatening violence. After visiting the Reverend Taiyo, who drove out the spirits, he felt much better and recovered from whatever he was going through for those 3 days. The book also mentions other sightings, from a woman just standing in the middle of nowhere to a woman who would visit her old friends' houses and leave saltwater stains on the cushions. Another man said that he felt a strange chill in his apartment after the tsunami. He said that when he lied in bed that he felt something walking across his chest. Some of the most believable stories come from the taxi drivers in the area, some of whom refused to even drive in certain areas after seeing spirits there. One story told in Unsolved Mysteries was that of a taxi driver who picked up a man who was wearing a very thick coat in the middle of summer when it was very hot. He thought this was strange but took the man to the destination that he wanted to go to. However, when they arrived at the destination and the taxi driver looked back, the man was no longer there. He'd just vanished. A different driver recalled a time where he picked up a woman who wanted to be taken to a district that was completely empty since the tsunami. He asked if she was sure, and she replied by asking him, "Have I died?" When he turned around to face her, the backseat was empty. There were many other similar stories of taxi drivers taking passengers who either disappeared once they got there or at some point in the journey. A graduate student interviewed 100 taxi drivers in the area, and 7 of them told very similar stories of phantom passengers who would have disappeared before they reached the destination. What makes the taxi drivers' accounts more believable is that while there is no way to tell if they actually saw ghosts, there are physical records showing that the meters were still running, and obviously because the passengers supposedly vanished before they reached the destination, the tariffs weren't paid. Instead, the drivers would just pay for them. It sounds like it was just an accepted part of all this. Because many taxi drivers themselves had lost family and friends to the tsunami, they wanted to help the spirits move on if they could. Which was a really touching part of the story in my opinion. I mean, the whole community was devastated by what had happened. These taxi drivers just wanted to help some people move on. It's still not definitive proof of anything, but it is just strange that so many drivers would report similar experiences, and that the meters would show that journeys had been made, but the taxi drivers had to pay for them. I mean, sure, these guys could have just been dossing at work and looking for an excuse to get out of it for a few minutes, but it just seems like a lot of effort to go to. There are many interesting and sad stories from people who claim to have seen ghosts since the tsunami, but the problem is these are just stories. There's no physical evidence to back up these claims. While experiences like those summarised in the video can feel very real to those who have been through them, there are other explanations for these possible sightings. Unsolved Mysteries suggests that these experiences might be some kind of manifestation of PTSD or grief from such a huge traumatic event. A large number of people were treated for psychological conditions related to the tsunami. Seeing ghosts and having supernatural experiences are one of the symptoms of these conditions. It's also important to mention that the area that was affected by the tsunami had advanced slower than other parts of Japan, so many people might have been more traditionally minded, so to speak, meaning that they might have been more likely to believe in ghosts and therefore might have been more likely to see them. And if you really believe in something and you lose so many friends and family members in such a catastrophic event, never even getting the chance to say bye to them, it doesn't seem too unlikely that these people might have just really wanted to see their spirits and then just seen them. In such a distressing situation, it's not hard to understand how people might have just been so desperate to see these people again that they might have actually seen them, but I guess that doesn't mean that they were actually there. As Dr. Charles Figley told Ozzy, ghosts for some are more tolerable than the void created by death. One thing that sometimes makes me doubt ghost sightings is that people often have a motive to lie, whether that be for attention or for financial gain. Whether or not ghosts exist, I don't believe that the vast majority of psychics and mediums are genuine. I think a lot of them are just people that are taking advantage of vulnerable people, quite often for financial gain. I'm not saying no one who claimed to have seen a ghost after the tsunami could have been making it up for attention or financial gain, but I do think after such a traumatic event, I feel like people would be less likely to lie for those benefits. If they weren't actually seeing ghosts, I do just believe that their experiences can be chalked up to trauma. It's mentioned in the show that there have been other disasters, from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to other tsunamis and earthquakes, and while there might have been isolated reports of ghosts, there are nowhere near the number of reported sightings as there were after this tsunami. It's an interesting point, but I don't think this proves or disproves that ghosts exist. It could be argued that there was huge trauma to the survivors of the other disasters, so why didn't their PTSD manifest in ghost sightings like those in this tsunami? On the other hand, you could argue that if ghosts really existed, why wouldn't people see them after other huge events? To relate back to the previous point, I think cultural differences could play a role in this. In the area where the tsunami hit, it sounds like quite a few people, a good proportion of the people there, were quite spiritual and therefore might have been more open to ghosts existing and therefore might have been more likely to see ghosts. It's also important to mention that the resources that are there to help people deal with grief are different in Japan than they are in the UK or the USA. For example, people don't generally receive grief counselling in Japan like they would in other countries. It could mean that people don't fully process the feelings of grief at the time. Those feelings could be repressed and resurface at a later date, possibly manifesting in ghost sightings or other experiences. I don't think the episode even came close to proving that ghosts exist, but it was still fascinating and emotive regardless. Ghosts aside, it was really interesting to gain insight into that culture and to see how they deal with death and process grief. It was also comforting to see the sense of community and how it really brought people together, like the Reverend stating that he set up some kind of support group for people to come together and discuss their grief. While I do have criticisms of the show as a whole, I do like the approach that they seem to be taking, where they seem to be doing kind of solid true crime cases, and then also other more out there stories like this, which debatably do serve better as stories than actual mysteries to solve. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe in ghosts, and if so, do you believe that the people of Ishinomaki actually saw ghosts after the tsunami, or do you think it was just some kind of manifestation of PTSD? I really hope you enjoyed the bonus video for Halloween, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.